Inside a Soviet bunker in the late 1970s, radar operators shout "Zakhvat Celi," meaning target lock, only to watch a fast-moving intruder appear on the screen and then vanish as quickly as it arrived. MiG-25 pilots scramble, convinced they can catch the mysterious high-altitude trespasser, but every system fails the moment they close in. Authorities called it a technical glitch. The truth was harsher. Each encounter revealed a brutal reality. The faster they chased, the faster the target disappeared. How did one aircraft make the world's most formidable air defense seem powerless? And what secret kept it forever out of reach and ultimately impossible to intercept? A sudden burst of static fills the bunker as the P-14 Tall King radar completes its sweep. The main scope operator leans in, eyes wide. A new blip flickers at the very edge of the screen, far higher and faster than routine traffic. He shouts, "Target on azimuth." Fingers race over dials, switching pulse repetition frequency modes in a desperate attempt to clarify the target. The blip holds steady for a heartbeat, then accelerates, stretching across the grid in a way that makes no sense. A second operator, sweat beading on his brow, barks into the headset, "Target locked." For a split second, the lock indicator glows red. Then, without warning, the contact jumps. The echo distorts, splits, and vanishes from the display. Broken lock rings out, followed by a scramble of voices. Someone mutters, "Jamming." Another curses under his breath. The room is alive with shouted updates, each operator fighting the equipment as much as the intruder. The P-35 bar lock radar is brought online, but the scan lags behind the target's velocity. The P-12 spoon rest, tuned for lower altitudes, can only catch the faintest ghost of the signal before it, too, loses the track. Every adjustment, every frequency change only seems to make the blip more elusive. The chief controller slams his fist on the console. Orders crackle out for immediate fighter scramble, but the radar crew already senses what's coming. The pattern is unmistakable. Target appears, lock is called, and in the next breath, the screen is empty. In the bunker, adrenaline surges, but the sense of helplessness is sharper still. The operators stare at their scopes, waiting for the next impossible return, knowing that somewhere above the clouds, something untouchable has just passed them by. A klaxon wails through the concrete corridors. The chief controller's command slices through the noise. He shouts, "Scramble, fighters, Foxbat." In the ready room, pilots snap awake, boots pounding steel as they rush for flight gear. Down the line, ground crews are already running, swinging open armored doors and yanking battery carts into position. Oxygen masks snap into place. A technician slaps the side of a cockpit and shouts the final clearance. The MiG-25's canopy slams shut. Turbines spool up with a metallic whine. Afterburners roar, and the air shudders as the Foxbat rolls, nose pointed at the end of the runway. Inside the bunker, the controller's voice is relentless, barking vectors and altitude. Radar operators scramble to re-establish contact, flipping switches and toggling dials, desperate to reacquire the target. A hand hovers over the PRF selector, moving through frequency bands, searching for any sign of the intruder. Each second stretches as the ground crew outside fights to launch the interceptors before the window closes. On the tarmac, the MiG-25 surges forward, wheels leaving concrete in a spray of vapor. The pilot hauls back on the stick, climbing at a rate that strains both machine and body. Every system is pushed to the edge, fuel pumps scream, turbines run hot, and the Foxbat claws for altitude, chasing a target that may already be gone. Back in the bunker, the tension snaps. The radar scope remains empty, the elusive blip refusing to return. One operator mutters a curse. Another pounds the side of his console. The scramble order echoes in the air, but the sense of urgency gives way to a hollow silence. Controllers stare at their screens, waiting for the next impossible challenge. In that quiet, the puzzle remains unsolved. A threat detected, a response launched, and nothing to show but the echo of vanished contact. May 1960. A U-2 reconnaissance plane piloted by Francis Gary Powers falls from the sky over Sverdlovsk. The wreckage and the captured pilot land on Soviet television screens, and in Washington, the fallout is immediate. The White House scrambles for answers. The CIA's confidence in high-altitude invulnerability vanishes overnight. Every classified memo, every back-channel cable now carries a single urgent question. How can the United States see inside the Soviet Union without losing another pilot or triggering a nuclear standoff? Inside Langley, the urgency is unmistakable. The old playbook is useless. Soviet missiles have reached the stratosphere. The Air Force and the CIA demand a platform that can fly higher, faster, and farther than anything before. The requirements are daunting: cruise above 80,000 feet, sustain speeds well beyond Mach 3, and survive in a world where every radar and missile battery is hunting for a target. Nothing in the existing arsenal comes close. The challenge lands on the desk of Clarence Kelly Johnson, head of Lockheed's Skunk Works. Johnson, already legendary for the U-2, receives the contract for a new reconnaissance aircraft before the ink has dried on Powers' confession. The program is classified under the name Oxcart, and for Johnson, the stakes are personal. He writes to the CIA that they must build an aircraft the Soviets cannot touch. Congressional records from 1960 show a torrent of funding requests marked urgent. Internal memos stress that the next overflight must not only succeed, but must be invisible to Soviet defenses. The Air Force and the CIA unite behind a single doctrine: no more slow climbs, no more predictable routes, no more risking pilots to outdated technology. The Blackbird's birth is not a story of technological ambition, but of necessity. Every design parameter is set by the fear of another international crisis. The pressure for a breakthrough is relentless, and the clock is ticking. In the months that follow, Johnson's team begins to sketch out the impossible, a machine that will have to outrun not just enemy fighters, but the entire Soviet air defense network. The political mandate is clear: failure is not an option. Only something beyond the reach of any missile or interceptor will do. The Oxcart program moves forward in secrecy, fueled by the knowledge that the next misstep could ignite a war. At the heart of the Blackbird's invincibility was a fusion of advanced materials and radical engineering. The design team at Lockheed's Skunk Works, led by Kelly Johnson, faced one central enemy: heat. At sustained speeds above Mach 3, friction with the air pushed surface temperatures past 600 degrees Celsius, hot enough to weaken or melt conventional aircraft metals. Aluminum was out of the question. Johnson's engineers turned to titanium, a metal both strong and light, but notoriously difficult to machine. 85% of the airframe became titanium alloy, a figure unmatched by any operational aircraft before or since. Even the fasteners and hydraulic lines were reimagined to survive the relentless heat. The Blackbird's power came from two Pratt & Whitney Jane 58 turbojets, each a marvel in its own right. These engines were not just designed for bursts of speed. They could cruise at Mach 3.2 for hours, something no other jet engine could match. At those velocities, the J-58s transitioned from pure turbojet to a hybrid mode, with bypass doors and bleed valves channeling excess air around the core, turning the nacelles into partial ramjets. The real breakthrough was the variable geometry inlet spike. Controlled by an analog system, the spike moved forward or aft up to 26 inches, precisely positioning shockwaves to slow supersonic air before it entered the engine. This allowed the Blackbird to accelerate at will, even at the edge of the stratosphere. Heat, always the enemy, required another solution: cooling. The SR-71 burned a special fuel called JP-7, formulated not to ignite easily, but to absorb heat. Before combustion, JP-7 circulated through heat exchangers, drawing energy away from the engines and skin. The fuel itself doubled as a cooling system, carrying away thermal load that would have destroyed lesser planes. Every gallon was a shield against the physics of high-speed flight. All these systems worked together, not just for speed, but for survival. The Blackbird's titanium skeleton, JN-58 engines, inlet spikes, and JP-7 fuel cooling created an envelope no interceptor could match. Above 80,000 feet and at Mach 3.2, the Blackbird did not just outrun missiles and fighters, it operated in a realm where few could even follow. The result was an aircraft that could cross continents in minutes, gather intelligence deep inside hostile territory, and then vanish before defenses could react. The Blackbird's edge was not a single feature, but the integration of every component, each one designed to push the limits of what was possible in flight. The MiG-25 claws skyward, every gauge in the cockpit edging toward red. The pilot feels the weight of acceleration press him into the seat as the Foxbat rockets past 40,000 feet, afterburners gulping fuel at a rate that would drain the tanks in minutes. The R-15 engines howl, their temperature needles creeping ever closer to the danger zone. At maximum power, the turbines run so hot that the metal glows beneath the panels, and the risk of catastrophic failure grows with every second spent above Mach 2.8. Inside the suit, sweat pools at the pilot's neck. Breathing comes in short, shallow bursts. Air thins rapidly above 60,000 feet, and the Foxbat systems fight to keep the cockpit pressurized. The climb rate, once ferocious, now slows as the jet approaches the edge of its ceiling. The altimeter ticks past 70,000 feet, but the aircraft shudders, buffeted by turbulence at the edge of the stratosphere. The pilot knows the margin for error is razor thin. Push too hard and the engines could seize, or the airframe could deform under the strain. Ground control's voice crackles in the headset, urging maximum climb. But the pilot's eyes flick to the temperature warnings. R-15 turbines are rated for only 10 to 15 minutes at full afterburner before the risk of failure spikes. Past that limit, the metal inside the engines begins to weaken, seals can rupture, and the chance of an uncontained fire rises with every heartbeat. The Foxbat was built for sprints, not marathons. Every second spent chasing the intruder at these heights and speeds is borrowed time. Fuel drains at a staggering rate. At maximum afterburner, the Foxbat can burn through its tanks in less than 20 minutes, leaving no margin for error or extended pursuit. The pilot feels the vibration through the stick, senses the strain in every bolt and weld. The airframe groans, the turbines scream, and the world outside the canopy fades to a deep, endless blue. In this realm, the MiG-25 is running out of options and running out of time. The pilot's gloved hand finds the arming switch for the R-40 missile, eyes flicking between the radar display and the altimeter. Every second, the Foxbat closes the gap, but the numbers on the scope tell a harsher truth. For a missile shot to have any hope, the radar must hold a steady lock, not just for a heartbeat, but for the entire guidance window. The seeker on the R-40 relies on the MiG's radar beam as a lifeline, riding that signal all the way to the target. If the lock breaks, the missile goes blind, and it flies a useless ballistic arc into empty sky. At these speeds, the math is unforgiving. The SR-71 covers more than 1 kilometer every second. The Foxbat's radar, designed for bombers and cruise missiles, struggles to keep the Blackbird in its sights as the Doppler shift pushes the signal to the edge of its filters. Even when the lock indicator flares, it may last only 3 or 4 seconds, barely enough for the launch logic to trigger, never enough for the missile to home in with certainty. Soviet weapons officers calculate the engagement envelope over and over. At best, the R-40 can sprint at Mach 4, but it needs at least 5 to 15 seconds of uninterrupted guidance to correct its course and track a maneuvering target. With the Blackbird streaking above 80,000 feet and changing heading at will, the odds of holding lock that long shrink to almost nothing. In the bunker, controllers know the numbers. By the time the MiG-25 reaches intercept altitude and aligns for a shot, the SR-71 is often already past. The closure rate so high that the window for a successful missile launch is measured in single digits, seconds not minutes. The pilot presses for lock again, watching the radar blip flicker. Even a perfect intercept geometry leaves no margin for error. If the radar loses track, if the Blackbird jinks, accelerates, or simply outruns the missile's reach, the entire engagement collapses. The R-40, built for brute force, is helpless without a guiding hand. Soviet analysts poring over intercept data begin to admit what the pilots already suspect. The guidance window is so narrow, the intercept so fleeting, that a successful missile shot against the Blackbird is mathematically out of reach. The hum of machinery pulses through the bunker as radar operators brace for the next sweep. The P-14 Tall King, a massive VHF array, rotates methodically above the tree line. Its full revolution takes nearly 12 seconds, an eternity when tracking something that covers more than 30 kilometers in that span. Each operator knows the numbers by heart. At Mach 3, a target can leap 60 to 100 kilometers between sweeps, slipping through the cracks in the detection net. The P-14 scope lights up with a faint echo, but by the time hands reach for the plotting board, the blip has already advanced far beyond its last known position. Across the room, another console comes alive. The P-35 bar-lock radar, designed for intermediate range tracking, spins at a slightly faster pace, but even its quicker cycle cannot keep pace with a target racing across the upper atmosphere. The handoff between systems is frantic. One operator marks a position, another shouts for a heading, but each update is already stale by the time it is relayed. The P-12 Spoon Rest, built for catching low and medium altitude threats, struggles to find purchase on a target so high and fast. Its slower sweep, up to 10 seconds, means the Blackbird can vanish between pulses, leaving only a phantom trace behind. Every radar in the chain is forced to work by relay, each passing the baton to the next, hoping for a moment when all three can triangulate a fix. But the temporal gap is always there. The Tall King's sweep of 12 seconds is a chasm the Blackbird crosses in less than the blink of an eye. Operators attempt to compensate by switching pulse repetition frequency settings, hoping to catch the target on a different cycle. The console lights flicker as settings are changed, but the Doppler shift at these speeds bends the returns, making the echoes jump or split. Ghost targets appear, then fade, sowing confusion. The scramble for a solution is constant. Operators call out timings and try to predict where the blip will reappear, but the velocity of the Blackbird turns every calculation into guesswork. The handoff from early warning to fire control radars is a race against time, one that the SR-71 always seems to win. Each sweep is a reminder that the system was built for bombers and cruise missiles, not for a plane that can cross a radar sector before the antenna completes a single turn. In the bunker, frustration mounts. The operators are not just fighting the intruder, they are fighting the clock, and the clock is always on the Blackbird's side. A sharp call slices through the bunker as the Smerch A fire control radar comes online. The operator's hand hovers over the tracking gate, eyes fixed on a single, volatile blip. At these speeds, the Doppler shift is no longer a subtle drift. It is a violent wrench across the frequency spectrum. The SR-71's Mach 3 closure rate slams its echo to the far edge of the radar's filters, pushing the return outside the range the system can process. The blip stretches, jumps, and then fractures, leaving the display littered with ghost images. The operator shouts, "Switching pulse repetition frequency." The console responds with a staccato burst of static as the pulse repetition frequency cycles, hunting for a mode that might catch the intruder. But the Blackbird is already exploiting the physics, its velocity folding the radar's velocity scale and creating alias returns that leap unpredictably across the screen. The tracking gate, designed to follow bombers and cruise missiles, cannot expand fast enough. As soon as the Blackbird's signature exceeds the gate's bandwidth, the system's logic triggers an auto-drop. The lock warning light winks out. An urgent voice calls, "Lock broken." The room freezes as the target vanishes, not with a fade, but with a snap. Operators scramble to re-establish the track, toggling through pulse repetition frequency modes, but each switch only multiplies the confusion. New echoes appear where none should be, then flicker and die. The Smirch A's narrow tracking filter, so effective against conventional threats, is useless against a target that can cross its entire engagement range in seconds. The physics are unforgiving. At Mach 3.2, the Doppler frequency shift from the SR-71 can exceed the radar's filter bandwidth by orders of magnitude. The system, built to process closure rates of a few hundred meters per second, is confronted with a return shifting by nearly a kilometer per second. The radar's analog circuits cannot keep up, and its digital logic, primitive by today's standards, declares the track invalid and drops it automatically. A second operator tries to reacquire, adjusting the tracking gate's width, but the Blackbird's path is already outside the radar's predictive envelope. Any course change, just a few degrees, throws the solution out of bounds. The radar's auto-drop logic is absolute if the target's measured velocity or range exceeds the tracking gate for even a fraction of a second. The lock is severed. The missile guidance system, dependent on continuous illumination, goes blind. In the bunker, frustration boils over. The cause is not jamming or pilot error, but the sheer physics of high-speed closure. The Doppler ambiguity, velocity folding, and tracking gate limitations are hardwired into the system. Every time the SR-71 crosses the radar's field, the outcome is the same: a momentary lock, a burst of hope, and then nothing. The operators know the pattern by heart. The technology, designed for a different era, simply cannot hold a target that moves faster than the radar's own logic can comprehend. A pattern emerges from the archives, one that repeats across years and across borders. In the north, SR-71 mission logs from the Barents Sea show a string of missile warnings and fighter scrambles. Each time, Soviet air defense crews track the Blackbird as it approaches the edge of their radar coverage. The log entries are terse. Target detected, altitude 80,000 plus. Foxbat scramble ordered, lock achieved, but then almost without exception, the next line reads, target lost, broken lock. Soviet commanders treat these incidents with the urgency of a national emergency. The Barents Corridor is home to the Northern Fleet's ballistic missile submarines, assets too valuable to leave unguarded. Yet every scramble and every missile warning ends the same way. The SR-71's speed and altitude carry it beyond the reach of both radar and missile before any engagement can take place. Over and over, the mission logs record the fleeting moment of hope followed by the abrupt reality of loss. Farther west, the Baltic approaches tell a similar story. Swedish Air Force radar stations, positioned at the crossroads of NATO and Soviet airspace, keep meticulous records of every Blackbird sortie. Between 1977 and 1988, Swedish controllers track 322 Baltic Express missions. Out of these, their radar systems managed to achieve missile lock on the SR-71 51 times. That figure seems impressive until the details are examined. Each lock is measured in seconds, not minutes. The Blackbird's closing speed, combined with the approach of Swedish Viggens or Soviet fighters, creates a combined closure rate near Mach 5. The Swedish logs note that a successful intercept would require the Blackbird to fly straight and level for the entire engagement window, a scenario that never occurs. Every lock breaks almost instantly as the SR-71 alters course or accelerates, leaving only a brief spike on the tracking tape as evidence. The Soviet side, meanwhile, is no less determined. MiG-25s launch from bases in the Baltic states and East Germany, guided by ground controllers who call out vectors with increasing urgency. The interceptors climb, radar scopes flicker, and the same cycle repeats. Momentary acquisition, then the target vanishes. Swedish radar operators, watching from the sidelines, record a parade of Soviet fighters failing to close the gap. The Blackbird's operational ceiling and sustained speed keep it just out of reach, leaving Soviet pilots with nothing but contrails fading in the upper atmosphere. First-hand accounts from SR-71 crews offer a window into these encounters. Colonel Richard Graham, a veteran Blackbird pilot, describes watching a trio of MiG-25s climb in trail formation beneath his aircraft. He recalls that they were about 10 miles apart, afterburners lit, trying to intercept him. All three went right by underneath him. No problem at all. The separation in altitude and speed is so great that even with perfect positioning, the Foxbats could only watch as the Blackbird slipped past overhead. Mission records confirm the routine nature of these encounters. Each engagement, whether over the Barents, the Baltic, or the Arctic, follows the same script: detection, scramble, momentary lock, abrupt loss. Swedish and Soviet logs, cross-referenced with declassified US records, show that out of hundreds of attempts, not a single missile ever found its mark. The technical reports underline the point. For every 51 radar locks achieved in the Baltic, all were broken before a missile could even begin to home in. The Blackbird's margin for escape is measured not in miles, but in seconds. The archives leave no doubt. The pattern is global, persistent, and undeniable. Each log entry and each eyewitness account transforms theory into fact. The SR-71 could be detected, sometimes even locked, but never held. The cycle of hope and frustration echoes from the Barents to the Baltic, from radar rooms to cockpits, and into the classified memos that will soon confront the hard truth behind every failed intercept. A classified memo stamped with the seal of the Soviet Ministry of Defense moves through the corridors of PVO Strany headquarters. Its language is precise, almost clinical. In one line, the assessment reads that maintaining continuous radar lock on the American high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft is not achievable within current technical parameters. The document, signed by a PVO general, does not dwell on blame. Instead, it lists the findings: radar refresh rates, missile guidance windows, and the closure speeds that make interception unattainable. The memo's conclusion is unmistakable. Today, hypersonic weapons and stealth drones race across new frontiers, but even now, no operational aircraft has ever outrun more missiles or more rivals than the Blackbird. Its legacy reminds us true technological leaps redraw the limits of what is possible, and sometimes the world's most powerful adversaries are left chasing shadows. In an age defined by surveillance and speed, the sky's boundaries are still being rewritten. Thanks for watching. Let your thoughts fly in the comments below.